Good morning, beautiful people. Happy Tuesday. We'll talk a little about Donald Trump and the Iran war. And Mayo was sentenced to life. Everything has served for educational and for use purposes. I won't be with you too long today, but let me get started.
Latest of what's going on in the Middle East being reignited as the United States and Iran teetering on a close to all-out war over the weekend. The exchange of attacks now in day number 10 on civilian and military structures continued to escalate, with the at least 3 U.S. service members killed since combat resumed a week ago. But we do know, according to CENTCOM, that the strikes on day number 10 have come to a close. Say they've completed another round of strikes. They struck Iranian military command centers, maritime capabilities, missile, drone launch sites, air defense systems to degrade Iran's ability to continue attacking commercial vessels flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. And President Trump was expected to attend the dignified transfer of some of those individuals tragically lost during this. But Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, saying the dignified transfer no longer taking place. The exact day and time are still being finalized. President Trump was supposed to be attending that, but earlier today we learned the identities of 2 of the U.S. service members killed in action on Friday at the base in Jordan, that being the 19-year-old Private Isabella Gonzalez and 25-year-old First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan. You can see some of their images of Isabella Gonzalez there from Texas and the First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan from a native of Hawaii. For more on this and the latest strikes, let's take you out to Alex Hogan with the latest update.
Has climbed to $4 per gallon, and U.S. oil reserves have dropped to their lowest level since 1983. In Washington, Alex Hogan, Fox News.
All right, thank you so much for that, Alex. We're joined right now by retired Lieutenant General Karen Gibson, the former Director of Intelligence for U.S. Central Command. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Monday evening. We know this is day number 10 of these reignited, renewed strikes on Iran. Can you see a broader strategy from the Trump administration?
Well, I'd say this latest phase of the campaign, the one that essentially began on 8 July or July 8th, is about a fight for who will control the Straits of Hormuz. So Iran insists that there will be a new mechanism for traveling through the Straits for commercial vessels that transit there, and that they will control. And that's what this phase is about. The first phase, from February 28th through the ceasefire that was enacted in April 8th, was a broader, more all-encompassing attack that we conducted in conjunction with Israel. And that was designed to significantly denigrate Iran's military and their leadership structure, and ideally to compel them to come to the negotiating table and agree to some enduring curbs on their nuclear ambitions. And we went through the ceasefire, the MOU, that was designed ideally to come to those agreements. That's kind of out the window right now. We're in a new phase of conflict that is really all about reestablishing normal commercial traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. And that has not happened yet.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because it has stalled out in that major choke point. Are we seeing any progress? Are we seeing success in any way in that form?
So I think at the tactical level, we've wrought considerable destruction against Iranian capabilities. At the operational level, in terms of suppressing their ability, not so much. That's incomplete. And at the strategic level, in terms of coercing Iran to pursue a different course, we have not achieved that objective. As a former intelligence professional, when I look at an adversary's actions, I look at 2 things, or the options that are available to them. One, I look at what kinds of will or intent do they have? What is it that they seek to achieve? And 2, what capabilities do they have to accomplish that? Iran has been very clear that their will and intent is to control traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. And the means by which they do that is largely what we've been attacking. But when you consider that they're still hitting ships in the Strait, despite all of these punishing airstrikes by CENTCOM, that they're still retaliating against our Gulf partners, and that they still insist that they're going to control traffic through the Strait, that tells me that strategically our battlefield successes are not translating to victory.
And you mentioned the strategy behind this and kind of laying it, the groundwork behind it. We do know now that 3 U.S. service members in this new phase of the conflict have lost their life, potentially a fourth. President Trump on social media saying that every time Iran kills an American soldier, they will pay for that killing many times over. This directive has been passed down through the chain of command there. I do want to ask you, does the loss of U.S. service members and their lives, does that change the calculus in any way?
Well, it's certainly very tragic. Retaliation is not typically a military objective or something that it's, when do you assess that you've retaliated sufficiently? It's an understandable response. And Iran does the same thing when we hit them to show that such actions cannot go unpunished. I don't think it changes the strategy, however, that we're pursuing. And we will continue to strike against Iranian military capabilities. But I think we need to start doing some things differently, changing the cost calculus for Iran so that they will back off on their insistence on controlling traffic through this international waterway that should be free of charge.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You talked about Epic Fury, the operation there, the new phase. What needs to come next for the United States to be more successful in that way? We do know that operations potentially could be limited by reports of dwindling stockpiles of air defense and long-range munition. Could that be a factor in how the administration, how the Defense Department weighs their decisions?
So I think in terms of those expensive interceptors, that's actually not about attacking Iran. That's about defending our Gulf partners from Iran's attacks. And as we begin to accelerate or expand or escalate our own target set, we need to prepare for Iran to increase its retaliation and to stand with our Gulf partners to help defend them. But in terms of munitions that are used against Iran, the highly precise ones will be used for special objectives. But I really think what's more critical or what's more challenging than diminishing munition stockpiles is the fact that it's really tough to entirely eliminate all of these cheap one-way attack drones. They're small, they're relatively inexpensive, they're easy to produce, they're easy to hide, and they have a very limited signature that's associated with them until they're actually launched. So finding them and interdicting them and certainly eliminating all of them is an incredibly high bar. That's a true challenge.
Yeah, that will be a challenge. And obviously, we know what's at stake here. And we know that there's limited information coming out from the region. I want to ask you about that as someone that served as the director of intelligence for U.S. Central Command, because the Pentagon getting some pushback, New York Times reporting saying the Pentagon withheld dozens of U.S. military injuries in this war in Iran. Sean Parnell with the Department of Defense talking about this, saying the numbers, nearly 100 service members were deemed to have some degree of injury since July 7th, that second phase. 96% have returned to duty. They are determined to get back in the fight. The vast majority of injuries experienced were minor concussions. Further updates will be posted on the Defense Casualty Analysis System. And we do know the identities of those 2 service members that lost their lives. We have yet to learn the identity of the third one that tragically lost their lives. They say operational security is why they're not giving away some of these details. How much of a balance is it to be transparent, to allow the public to know some of these information, the identity, but also know that this is a very, very complicated situation?
Yeah, there's an inherent tension there, in particular for a democracy like ours. So there is operational security. We don't want Iran to understand how, when, and where they are being successful. And we also similarly don't necessarily want them to know where they're not being successful, because they can learn from that information, hone their operations, and perhaps become more precise. So there is always hesitancy to share that kind of operational information that an enemy might use to their advantage. But on the other hand, in a democracy like ours, by the people, for the people, with congressional oversight, there is also a need to be transparent with both congressional stakeholders and the American public about what their tax dollars are being spent on, how American servicemen and women are being employed, to what end, with what strategy, with what anticipated goal. So there is an inherent tension there. And And that can be a tricky needle to thread.
Now, when is holding and withholding information justified? Is there a necessary chain of command? Are there direct rules in black and white, or is it a judgment call?
Well, it depends. I've been in situations, I was deployed to a combat theater where within 72 hours of things that occurred on the battlefield, they became unclassified and we were able to share those with the press. In other cases, if it's something, an operation, say that relied on highly sensitive intelligence information, you may never reveal aspects of that information, of that operation, because you would risk those sources and methods that were used to conduct it. In this case, where it's an Iranian strike against a base of ours in Jordan, and we're not even sure if the building that was hit, where the service members were, was the actual target of the Iranian strike. In that case, it may be a little different. And certainly, this is less transparency than I've been used to when I was engaged in combat operations.
I think a lot of people want to know some of this information to also know that some of their U.S. service members are being safe. And Sean Parnell on social media saying more than 100 injured since that July 7th, but 96% returning to active duty. Does the severity of an injury matter in whether you make it public?
Well, I think they've been pretty clear that most of these were concussions, which is what one would expect with that kind of blast, traumatic brain injury or something like that. And certainly there is a difference between that and large numbers of soldiers who are sent to Walter Reed or Launchstool or amputees or, what we saw in the early years of our campaign in Iraq, 2004, 2005, many service members returning without limbs. That is different, I think, than 96% return to duty.
All right, and I do want to ask you because we have limited information, but we also haven't heard from the Pentagon and also Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth in more than 2 months. They haven't held a briefing since that MOU going into place. What questions might you ask of him if you had the opportunity?
Yes. So it would depend on if it was a classified session or an unclassified session. But I would want to understand what the war aims of this campaign are and how the military operations that we're conducting now would contribute to that. I would want to know how it is linked to diplomatic efforts, how it is linked to perhaps financial pressure that might be applied by the Department of Treasury and others. Certainly, our campaign against Iran is probably not going to succeed if it is a strictly military campaign. I think many people have underestimated the Iranian regime's ability to withstand pain and pressure, whether those are punishing airstrikes or years of economic sanctions. I think many people also don't understand that for the men who are calling the shots in Iran, they see this as an existential fight, a threat to their very survival. And so strictly military operations without diplomatic or financial pressures, or certainly the assistance of allies, is far less likely to succeed than a more comprehensive whole of government approach. And I would want to know more about those aspects and how we are working with other nations, whether they're allies in the Gulf, Europe, or elsewhere, to try to apply the appropriate pressure to Iran when they've shown such a willingness to withstand these kind of airstrikes and yet still insist on controlling the strait.
That is a very good point. Very complicated with many different facets to it. Karen, thank you so much. I appreciate your time here on Live Now from Fox and your understanding and your perspective of this conflict in the region. Thanks again.
All right, you guys, let me switch gears a little bit. Let's see, what was I? Here we go.
Talk about another story today out of New York as a Mexican drug kingpin, El Mayo, was sentenced on Monday to life in prison in the United States after a plea deal last year in which he admitted to shipping millions of kilograms of cocaine over decades as the leader of the violent Sinaloa cartel. We're following this closely here on Live Now from Fox about this, saying Ismael El Mayo Zamdaba Baba was sentenced to life in prison Monday for his role as a top leader of the drug cartel, the powerful violent drug syndicate he ran for decades alongside El Chapo Joaquin Guzman, as this case obviously very important. We followed it since late last year. I do want to provide some more information about this, as in handing down the sentence at the hearing in Brooklyn, that federal courthouse, the U.S. District Judge Brian Cogan said that even though he had no choice but to impose a life sentence, he believed it was the right punishment. He said, quote, "The almost unimaginable amount of drugs attributable to him and the number of murders that we can document is enough to justify Congress's decision to make this a mandatory life sentence." Zambada agreed to a plea deal in August 2025 to charges including racketeering, conspiracy, continuing criminal enterprise. After the Justice Department said it would not seek the death penalty, the charges carried a mandatory term of life in prison. So let's take you out to the DOJ talking about the sentencing that came down today.
I'm Joseph Nocella, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. And with me today, our Assistant Attorney General, Tyson Duva of the Justice Department's Criminal Division, Terry Cole, Administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, Matthew Milholland from Homeland Security's Investigations, Jeff Lee Tyler, Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Washington Field Office, Jason Redding Quinones, United States Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, and Justin Simmons, United States Attorney for the Western District of Texas. A short time ago, Ismael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, was sentenced to life in prison. El Mayo was the world's single biggest drug trafficker this century. He joins fellow cartel leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in serving a life sentence following El Chapo's conviction here in Brooklyn in 2019. Over 3 decades, El Mayo and El Chapo built the Sinaloa cartel into the largest drug trafficking organization that the world has ever seen. This criminal empire flooded the United States and the world with deadly drugs, earned billions of dollars in profits, and then laundered those billions through the financial system. El Mayo and El Chapo corrupted numerous officials in Mexico to protect their criminal empire. And when corruption did not work, they used horrific violence, including torture, kidnapping, and murder. After El Chapo's conviction here in the Eastern District of New York, El Mayo took over exclusive control of the Sinaloa cartel. El Mayo then expanded the drug cartel's dealing to include fentanyl and other drugs, making the cartel deadlier and more profitable than ever. El Mayo continued as the cartel's leader until he was arrested in 2024. A life sentence, cut off from family, cut off from freedom, cut off from the outside world, is fitting punishment for the harm that El Mayo has caused to countless victims. During El Mayo's control of the cartel, tens of thousands of parents lost children to addiction, overdose, and drug-related violence. I hope that El Mayo's life sentence brings some small measure of comfort to those families who have suffered so much pain. The message today is clear. Drug dealing is a dead end, not just figuratively, but literally. Drug kingpins die in prison. El Mayo's fate is to die in prison. And with the amount of blood that drenches his hands, it is only fitting, and he deserves exactly that. Today's sentence reflects decades of work by dedicated public servants. Thank you to the Eastern District of New York's prosecution team, Assistant United States Attorneys Francisco Navarro, Robert Pollack, Adam Amir, Rebecca Urquiola, and Laura Mantell. the Southern District of Florida's prosecution team, Assistant United States Attorneys Monique Botera and Andrea Goldberg, the Western District of Texas's prosecution team, AUSA's Antonio Franco and Kyle Myers, and the Department of Justice trial attorneys, Jace Bourne and Kirk Handrich. Thanks also to the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois, the Southern District of California, and the Central District of California for their contributions. Thank you also to our law enforcement partners, the FBI, HSI, and DEA, and others. Many of the law enforcement officers in these agencies risked their lives over decades to bring two of the world's most notorious drug kingpins to justice. Finally, I'd like to thank Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche for his leadership. I will now turn the podium over to Assistant Attorney General Duva.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. My name is Tyson Duva, and I'm the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division and Main Justice in Washington, D.C., and I supervise the Money Laundering, Narcotics, and Forfeiture section, which was an integral part of this prosecution. And I'm in the seat, but the real credit goes to the law enforcement officers, agents, and prosecutors for decades who worked on this case, and that is literally hundreds. They worked for 2 decades to bring this defendant, Ishmael Zambada Garcia, El Mayo, to justice today. And all of their efforts, those who are in the Department of Justice now, those who were here before, in the Eastern District of New York, the Southern District of Florida, the trial attorneys in the Criminal Division, the Western District of Texas, and the other districts that Joe just mentioned, it really shows the true partnership together with DEA, HSI, and FBI, because it takes that many people, it takes the concerted effort, and it takes the teamwork to bring a narco trafficker, perhaps the worst that the world has ever seen, the most violent cartel the world has ever seen, to justice. And it happened in this historic courthouse, just like it happened many years ago with El Chapo Guzman. I've gotten to know a lot of the law enforcement officers and prosecutors who worked on this case, and it is truly historic. This defendant perpetrated unspeakable crimes and unquantifiable carnage on this country and other continents and many other countries for 50 years. Never held a legitimate job in his life. Never did anything worthwhile for any community. All he did was spread evil, poison, kill, and corrupt. His allocution at his plea hearing was very interesting. The last sentence he said, "I take responsibility for my role in all of it, and I apologize to everyone who has suffered or been affected by my actions." And that's it. I apologize. It is impossible to apologize for what this defendant did to the citizens of this country. And when you do these cases as a prosecutor and a law enforcement officer, you go all the way down to the overdose death cases that so many of us have prosecuted. And when you sit with those families who have lost a teenage daughter or son or loved one or family member to carnage like this, it changes you forever. Your loved one is gone, but you have to go on knowing that defendants like El Mayo killed your child, perpetrated injustice, and didn't care one bit until you're in a courtroom getting a life sentence that he deserves. He's 76 years old. We have no idea how much longer he will live, but he will spend the rest of his days in a prison cell. I want to thank the President of the United States, Donald Trump, for his unprecedented efforts for the total elimination of cartels and the efforts that he has put into the Homeland Security Task Force to further strengthen and bring law enforcement together for this purpose, to make these cases and other great cases behind them. I want to thank the Acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, for his support as well. There have been great successes in prior administrations, and particularly this administration. There have been innumerable extraditions and expulsions from Mexico to investigate and prosecute drug trafficking in this level. It is unacceptable, and wherever you are, the Criminal Division and these great U.S. attorneys' offices will come and find you, hunt you down, and prosecute you. At this time, I'd like to turn the podium over to the DEA Administrator, Terry Cole.
Good morning. For more than 4 decades, El Mayo helped transform the Sinaloa cartel into one of the most violent and prolific criminal organizations. Under his leadership, the cartel produced and trafficked massive amounts of deadly drugs at industrial scale. Its global network moved precursor chemicals across borders, operated clandestine laboratories, and flooded American communities with fentanyl, a weapon of mass destruction. The scale and severity of that threat led to the Sinaloa cartel being designated as a foreign terrorist organization. An operation of that size could not survive without violence and trafficking alone. Corruption was essential to El Mayo's criminal enterprise. He used bribery, influence, and intimidation to shield the cartel from justice, both within Mexico and beyond its borders. The cartel continues to corrupt institutions and undermine the rule of law for its own criminal purposes. Today, El Mayo answered for his crimes before an American courtroom. That outcome reflects decades of tireless work by the men and women of DEA, HSI, and the FBI, and our federal law enforcement partners around the globe. It also reflects a principle that has guided this agency since its founding. No matter how powerful traffickers become and how much wealth and influence they acquire, DEA will not relent. Whether it takes months, years, or decades, we will not stop. We will not lose focus. We do not forget. To every member of DEA, HSI, and FBI, and our prosecutorial team who played a role in this investigation, thank you. Some began this work decades ago, others carried it forward. Today, you've provided that determination and an unwavering commitment to justice can overcome even the most powerful criminal organizations. Today is a great day for law enforcement, but let me be clear. This sentencing is not the end. It's just the beginning. It's a warning to every cartel leader, global criminal enterprise, and foreign terrorists. If you traffic deadly drugs, profit from the suffering of others, and threaten our communities, DEA is coming for you. Whether you're a drug trafficker or a corrupt government official, DEA is coming for you. Our work is far from over. We will disrupt your networks. We will cut off your financial lifelines, seize your illicit profits, and work with our partners to save American lives. Because this is about America first. Americans first. To the mothers and families who have lost their loved ones to fentanyl, DEA will never forget your loss. And we will never stop holding those responsible accountable. Justice does not have an expiration date. Today's sentencing proves that. God bless our troops. God bless our country. And now I'd like to turn over to HSI Deputy Executive Director, Matt Mulholland.
Good morning. My name is Matthew Mulholland. I'm the Acting Deputy Executive Associate Director for Homeland Security Investigations. Today, the United States closes the book on one of the most violent and destructive criminal figures of our time. The most prolific drug trafficker in modern history, El Mayo. For more than 30 years, El Mayo ruled through raw terror. Under his command, the Sinaloa cartel became a machine of brutality and greed. It armed itself like a military, stockpiled war-grade weapons, bought influence through blood money, and enforced its will through torture, murder, and intimidation. Under El Mayo's reign of terror, the Sinaloa cartel did not just traffic drugs. It waged a sustained campaign of violence, corruption, and fear on both sides of the border. At the heart of that criminal machine was his decision to unleash fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine on the American and Mexican people. Nearly 20 years of HSI investigative work culminated in today's sentencing. For nearly 2 decades, HSI special agents and investigators, including some who are here today, interviewed countless witnesses, dissected every shred of evidence, and devoted themselves through sleepless nights and early mornings to make certain that El Mayo and his co-conspirators would face justice. They do it for the people whose voices have been silenced, whose lives have been shattered, and those that the cartel violence and drug poisoning has affected the most. El Mayo's rule became synonymous with entrenched public corruption, the generation of billions of dollars from fentanyl and narcotics trafficking, and unimaginable bloodshed, acts of narco-terrorism that devastated communities and claimed countless lives. Every fentanyl shipment translated into overdoses, empty chairs at dinner tables, families who will never be whole again. The graves, the relapses, the shattered lives in the United States and elsewhere are the true legacy of El Mayo. Today's monumental sentencing is the direct result of the Homeland Security Task Force. Its investigation was worked at the highest level in the most aggressive form. HSI New York initiated and drove the long-term Mexican Federation investigation with a singular focus: target the Sinaloa cartel at the top, at the money, and in the infrastructure that keeps it alive. Through the Homeland Security Task Force, HSI fused its global investigative reach, its financial expertise, and border authorities with the invaluable capabilities of my colleagues from the FBI, and United States prison, removed from the empire of violence and corruption that he created. But this is not the end of our fight. HSI, operating through the Homeland Security Task Forces, will continue to relentlessly target every layer of this cartel. There's no corner of this organization beyond our reach, no level of leadership off limits. If you lead, enable, or profit from Sinaloa cartel operations, we're coming for you. Lastly, I'd like to thank the HSI special agents and intelligence analysts and law enforcement partners who have dedicated their lives to this work. They do it for the communities torn apart by addiction and cartel violence. They do it for every victim whose life has been permanently altered by the Sinaloa cartel's crimes and the decisions made by El Mayo. The man who helped cause so much of this devastation will never direct violence again, never again profit from American deaths, and never again operate under the illusion that he is untouchable. HSI will not stop. Not with the Sinaloa cartel, not with any cartel. Thank you. Next is the special agent in charge for the Washington Field Office of the FBI, Special Agent in Charge Tyler.
Thank you, Matt, and good morning. I'm Jeff Tyler, Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Washington Field Office Criminal Division. I'm grateful to stand shoulder to shoulder with our partners today as we announce this historic sentencing, a life sentence for a lifetime of crime. El Mayo's rise to power began when he and El Chapo founded the Sinaloa cartel in the late 1980s. Through bribery, corruption, and violence, they built the cartel into one of the largest drug trafficking organizations in the world. As my colleague said, the Sinaloa cartel has trafficked in tens of thousands of tons of drugs, including cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl into the United States, all while laundering billions of dollars of illicit proceeds back to Mexico. With El Mayo's sentencing today, both founders of the world's most notorious cartel will spend the rest of their lives in American prisons. His sentence is a win for the dozens of law enforcement officers and attorneys who spent decades working on this case. It's also a victory for every American family who has lost a loved one to a drug overdose, and every Mexican community that has lived under the fear of cartel violence. I'd like to thank the DEA, HSI, my colleagues at the FBI, and U.S. Attorney's offices from coast to coast, and all of our other partners who played a vital role in bringing El Mayo to justice. I'd like to thank our Homeland Security Task Force partners who are working with us every day toward our goal of eliminating criminal organizations like the Sinaloa cartel. We can't recover all the blood under El Mayo's command, but we can continue to pour our collective resources into dismantling the cartel that he built. The sentences of El Chapo and El Mayo should serve as a warning to their sons and other faction leaders who seek to preserve the cartel. If you continue to traffic in brutality, if you continue to choose violence over law and order, we won't stop until we bring you to justice. I will now turn the podium over to United States Attorney Jason Redding, Quinones, Southern District of Florida.
I think there's gonna be a movie someday. I mean, hey, it is what it is. You guys doing okay? I won't be with you too long. I won't be with you guys too long today. I'm just starting your day out.
In demand preliminary hearing that is going to get started tomorrow for singer and TikTok star David. David Anthony Burke is facing first-degree murder and child abuse charges in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. This highly anticipated multi-day preliminary hearing is scheduled to begin to determine if there is sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. And for more on this, we want to bring in our next guest to help break it all down. Trey Lavelle, attorney and legal analyst. Great to have you on, Trey. And yeah, this, of course, is going to set the stage here tomorrow for the preliminary hearing. And Trey, I always wonder for these preliminary hearings, how does the prosecution really juggle and handle showcasing some of the evidence, but not also showcasing your full hand to the defense?
Yeah, they really have to decide how much to put on because the burden is much lower for the preliminary hearing. It's really, they just have to show probable cause that a crime was committed and that David did it. You know, they don't have the beyond a reasonable doubt threshold that they do for an actual trial. So they don't have to show all of their cards, but they do have to do enough to ensure that they do get that probable cause. And as a result, you know, they're going to, you know, be, you know, lay on the side of caution and make sure they put enough evidence, which is why I think it's going to be, you know, certainly a number of days. This is going to be a long preliminary hearing. They're going to put on a lot of the evidence. They're not going to show their full hand, but it's going to be substantial. And the defense is going to have a chance at challenging it.
And Trey, I also wonder too about these preliminary hearings, why it has to be so drawn out with these multiple days. How come when the judge hears these facts of the case, why he can't say, okay, you know what, I've heard enough. Yeah, there is probable cause.
You know, preliminary hearings normally are much shorter. You know, they're a few hours, you know, maybe a day or so, depending on the case. This is a high profile case. Hochman is all over this. And there is a lot of evidence that has been trickling out through the briefs and through what we're hearing. So, you know, they're going to need the time to go through all of that. And I think the prosecution wants to make sure that they get it across that there's a lot of evidence here for all of their claims. Remember, this is first degree with special circumstances, you know, could result in the death penalty, life without the possibility of parole, the most serious consequences. And they don't want to get any lesser charges. They want to go for the maximum. So they're going to need the time to put on that evidence. The judge is not going to shortcut it. The judge is going to allow whatever time that they need. And then you're going to have the challenges on the defense, and that's going to take a while too. They're going to challenge everything. So that's normally they don't take this long, but for a high-profile case like this, and what's at stake, you know, they're going to to take their time and they're going to put on a substantial amount of evidence. So you will need the days to do that.
And this was a case where, let's face it, the district attorney as well as the police investigation, it took a long time to get to this moment right now.
It certainly did. I mean, the investigation that they did was substantial. And I mean, the car was discovered in September. They didn't arrest him until April of the following year. And you know, there were three grand juries were impaneled, and a lot of evidence handling. Everything from DNA to video to GPS to text messages, digital, things like that. So they took their time. They wanted to make sure they had everything in place. They basically wanted to have their case in place before they even arrested him. And so it wasn't a quick arrest. They took their time, and you know, it was important that they did that to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed when it comes time to a preliminary hearing like this, and they're all ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people looking at this case, you know, just wondering, you know, in the world that we live in, especially everything digital and everything that is sent through text message, video, whatever. And then you have the case here of the victim that is in the trunk of this Tesla decomposed. It's the Tesla of the suspect. I think a lot of people saying, okay, why did it take so long to get this person arrested?
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, nowadays law enforcement has so many different tools they have to prove a case. You know, through the online, through the digital, through the cell phone, through the GPS, through all of that type of stuff, and the forensics and the science. And so they have a lot of tools at their belt. But the facts of this case, you know, are still puzzling. I mean, why was the remains left in the car? Why wasn't something done with that? You know, it was just being parked out there, obviously going to be flagged at some point and be towed in if nobody picked it up. So the underlying facts are very, you know, questionable as to how that happened. But in this case, they just wanted to make sure, and they didn't want any early arrests. They wanted to have everything, you know, in line. And so I think they took a little bit longer than normal, but I think they needed to, in light of all of the evidence that ultimately they've amassed. I mean, from what we've heard, there is a lot of evidence in this case, which makes for a much more powerful prosecution. So there is a strategy to wait. There's no rush to do this. And then once the time is right, then they make the arrest and you're ready to go.
And so, of course, the prosecution has what we were thinking is a lot of evidence. How will the defense try to poke some holes in this, where it seems like at this point a very uphill battle?
Yeah. So when you look at the evidence, the first thought is, "Wow, how are they going to challenge this? How are they going to beat this? There's so much evidence." But there's actually a lot of defenses and moves the defense can make. First of all, they can challenge, you know, who actually committed the crime. Maybe he was only involved in trying to hide the crime or the mutilation of the human remains and didn't actually kill him. If facts, a scenario like that came about, we're looking at 3 to 6 years for aiding and abetting the cover up of a crime and mutilation of human remains versus the death penalty, a life without the possibility of parole. Or let's say, you know, he did kill her, but maybe it wasn't first degree. Maybe he wanted to talk. They got in an argument. It was heat of passion, voluntary manslaughter. He killed her without the premeditation. You know, that's 3 to 11. So once again, 3 to 11 years versus death. So there's a lot of things that the defense can do here. It doesn't have to get an acquittal or not guilty, but it can mitigate the charges. It can take away the special circumstances, take away the first degree, maybe get to second degree, maybe get to voluntary manslaughter. So they will be going to that too, because we have to remember the prosecution has the burden. It has to prove premeditation. It has to prove special circumstances, and which is not easy. And so they're going to be looking at trying to dismember the case and mitigate as best they can.
And it seems like the sticking point here for this case is the alleged sexual relationship between the victim and the suspect. And it seems like what the prosecution is going to showcase is that David Burke had all of the reasons to kill this victim because she was going to say, hey, I'm going to tell people about this relationship. I was underage. This is what happened. And then this is how it all unfolded.
Yeah, so all of the elements are here for murder. He has means, opportunity, motive. They have evidence for all of that, which makes it a very compelling case. And it's going to make it a big challenge for the defense. But that's where the magic of defense lawyers come in. They challenge all that evidence. They challenge the chain of custody. They challenge the way evidence was collected. They challenge the DNA testing. They challenge whether or not it was lawfully collected. They challenge the experts. They challenge the credibility of the witnesses, their memories, their things like this. So, you got to remember, it's not necessarily them proving he's innocent, but it's the prosecution proving he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that means the defense just has to chip away and create that reasonable doubt. And they can do that through their cross-examination, and they're challenging of the evidence and creating the slightest suspicion that, hey, maybe this person isn't telling the truth, or maybe it wasn't collected properly, maybe it wasn't preserved, and so there's a lot of ways that the defense can challenge it. So that's kind of the way to look at it, but it is certainly a compelling case.
Yeah, it really, really is. It's going to be a fascinating look to see how it all goes starting tomorrow. Trey Lavelle, thanks so much for giving us a great preview of what to expect tomorrow and the coming week. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. All right, everyone, we'll take another 2-minute break.
You guys keeping up with that trial, or you're not interested in that one? I find it interesting with that guy. Let me give you one more before I get out of here. I find it interesting, but maybe you'll be more interested in this.
Mamdani pushing to arrest the leader of America's closest Mideast ally, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, when he visits for the UN General Assembly this September.
I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu belongs in The Hague. He's a war criminal who has been charged by the International Criminal Court. Whatever the law allows me to do in New York City, that's what we will do, but we won't be writing our own laws to that end.
But Bibi is pushing back, writing on X, quote, Mr. Mamdani should focus on fixing the damage his policies have caused New York. Mamdani appears interested in diverting public attention from his follies and attacking the leader of the Jewish state and the only democracy in the Middle East. Former Libertarian presidential candidate Austin Peterson joins me now. Austin, to be clear, the U.S. is not a member of the ICC, which put out this arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, and federal law prohibits state and local governments, i.e. New York City, from cooperating with ICC requests. So why is Mamdani doing this fake tough guy act anyway?
He knows it plays well to his base. Good morning, Todd. Good morning, Miss Missouri from Jefferson City. Mamdani's Israel derangement syndrome, this isn't a new obsession, Todd. Back in 2023, at the Democratic Socialists of American Convention, Mamdani told the crowd, when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF. The UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, laid out the legal walls that the mayor would have to knock down, and he simply can't because America never signed on to the Rome Statute, like you pointed out. The UN headquarters agreement grants diplomatic protection to visiting heads of government. Head of state immunity applies, and federal authority just frankly outguns the mayor's press conference wish list every time. It turns out that running American foreign policy and running New York City are two different jobs. Who knew, Todd?
Who knew? Well, maybe not this guy. Anti-Israel streamer Hassan Piker delivering a far-left speech to college Democrats, all while dressed in Mao Zedong garb. Watch this.
No more to the Democrats who compromise, who conciliate, and who betray us. No more to the Democrats who will collaborate and cooperate with the fascists, who will fund ICE, who will fund Israel, who will help poison the planet, who will stiff workers and help bosses. We don't need those Democrats anymore. We are coming. We are unbossed. We're unbought. We're unbound. And we will become undeniable.
Forget the Democrats, Austin. Shouldn't that clip be in every Republican ad between now and the midterms that this Marxist and people like him, the people clapping there in the audience, want to take over your way of life?
Yeah, the Republicans are loving this stuff, Todd. They want to run on this. It kind of reminds me of that Dwight Schrute clip from The Office when he was doing the speech like he was Mussolini. Communism killed 100 million people, and all we got was that lousy jacket. This guy's cosplaying the guy responsible for the deadliest famine in human history like it's just a fun bit. This is a guy who went to China and said that he felt no ties to America. And then he went on Cuba on a trip whose funding source has him now being subpoenaed by the Treasury Department. This guy isn't a revolutionary. This guy did not come up from the ranks of the proletariat. This guy's a Nepo baby. He Twitch streamed his way into a bigger platform. His uncle, Cenk Uygur, signed all the checks. The guy lives in a $2.7 million West Hollywood mansion. Now it's worth north of $3.5 million, I think. And he sits behind a gate so the fans and paparazzi can't get to him. His own defense, when people called out his hypocrisy, he said he'd rather be a rich socialist than a broke person defending capitalism. Well, at least he's honest. The revolution lives behind a gated community, Todd.
It is insane, the hypocrisy that he demonstrates. So the big question is, what are Democrats doing about it? Here's at least two of them.
There's some crazy stuff, when we're cheering for the Intifada and DSA, again, they say things like, takeover of key industries, government. That's communism.
But what does that have to do with supporting Hamas? What does that have to do with putting up candidates who say we should have no police, no prisons, we can't deport anybody, even if they commit rape or murder, Israel shouldn't exist? These are terrible ideas.
Austin, we're running late here, so I need a quick answer. But are the Democrats too late? Has the cancer already overrun the body?
Oh, for sure. Axios reported this same week, Todd. Republicans are quietly building their whole midterm strategy around this. They're calling this a hate election. They're pointing to the Democrats' Tea Party-like revolt by progressives. This is proof that the party can't govern, and why young people are not only Richard Nixon maxing, as I know you guys have reported here before on Fox and Friends First, but the young people are actually longing for a return to the days of Joseph McCarthy and wondering, did he go far enough?
The problem with that article is Republicans are saying, hey, you may not like us, but they're worse. Republicans need to come up with a better strategy than just that between now and November. Austin, got to leave it there. Thank you, sir.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
All right, now, great pleasure as.
Okay, let me get to Tom Homan before I get out of here. Hold on. Give me a second, I'll find it. Everybody likes Tom Homan.
To see what that ICE officer sees when he takes action, and I think it's going to help ICE with the false media that's out there about him.
But then why did the administration roll back what the Biden administration was trying to do to get body cameras and all?
That's a question above me. I'm just saying when I came back, and then when Democrats shut the government down, I was a part of that negotiation team up on the Hill. They kept going to Minnesota. All the mistakes they say happened in Minnesota. I don't think there's a lot of the mistakes they claim in Minnesota. A lot of them were, I don't think, mistakes. But one thing they asked was, we want body cameras. I said, well, there's money, $120 million in the bill you're holding up for me to buy the body cameras. So the reason there's not body cameras nationwide right now because they shut the government down. And anybody doesn't believe that, look it up. Now that we have the funding, body cameras have been purchased. As of last week, they were training the trainers. Body cameras are being deployed throughout the country, training the trainers so they can go to, a Boston field office and train everybody. Here's how to use it. Here's how long you need to keep the tape. And it just wasn't the funding for the cameras either. We had to hire a lot of people to handle FOIAs because I'm sure you don't FOIA cameras every day, right? So we got our people to handle the FOIAs. We got in the storage capability of holding millions and millions a video. That's expensive, but now we got the money. It's being implemented.
You just said that in Minnesota, what happened wasn't a mistake with the shootings that we saw.
Democrats claim all these mistakes were made, and when I sat down with them, they said, "Well, they want a mask off." No, we're not taking mask off.
You're saying it's not a mistake. Do you have an update on the investigation that they made?
No, look, I went to Minnesota and I said, from day one, it was not a perfect operation. There were several chains of command. I had a problem with the targeting. I went out there and made changes. I brought in additional internal affairs agents in. We created one chain of command. And you know, I see a lot of people out there saying that, you know, oh, we surrendered Minnesota. No, we didn't. We got agreements that keeps that city safer, keeps the officers safer, and keeps the aliens safer too. Because the more aliens we can arrest in the safety and security of a jail means less criminal aliens being released to the street. So we were able to go up there and continue the operation, but we had unprecedented agreements where less criminal aliens are hitting the street, which is good for that state, good for that city, and safer for our officers. That's a win across the board.
On the ICE officer in Maine, is there any more clarity on how he got his job, considering the vetting concerns that his wife has raised? Are there potential changes coming to the vetting process of ICE agents?
That's a question for ICE. That's under investigation. I'm sure that part now is part of the investigation. We'll let the investigation play. I'm not going to comment on investigation as it's ongoing.
The New York Times found a review that 550
Mark Wayne
people
Mullen as the DHS secretary. What would you describe as the difference between his management style and the management style of his predecessor?
And let me say this. Someone shared an X post this morning. There are people out there who want to attack this current administration. They don't think we're doing enough. There's an X post this morning that someone shared with me. Someone named Marianne or somebody. The ICE was arresting 3,000 aliens a day last year. No, not once. Not a single time do we arrest 3,000 aliens. And now they say we're arresting 2,000. We're hitting about 2,000 pretty steadily. Like I said this weekend, I looked at the data. Arrests are up about 40% over the same time period that we've been funded. Now, I've been frank from the beginning. Numbers were down for a few months because the department was shut down. Of course, numbers are going to go down when targeting less and officers, less overtime and all those other reasons. When you shut, the government down, there's going to be less to do. So, and I was very honest from day one. The numbers were down 12 to 16%, but now the numbers are trailing up 40% because we are fully funded. I thought they're doing their job. But I'm really tired of the false narratives going out there about what this administration is doing. The numbers are up. Last month, June, highest numbers of arrests in the history of the agency.
How many?
Then I see people say, wow, you're combining CBP numbers or Coast Guard. No, I didn't. The numbers I quoted this weekend were ICE numbers. So I wish people would do a little bit of research before they start attacking this administration, what we're doing right now. Our numbers are higher than ever been. And I'm sick and tired of people saying we're not doing enough. That's an insult to every ICE agent that's strapping up every day, working 6 and 7 days a week to get this done. It's an insult. These men and women are acting professionally. They're out there making record numbers, and people want to question numbers. I guess that's your right. But let's compare facts.
I just have a question about the difference in the management style of those.
Me and Mark Wayne want to get along well, and he cares about the mission. We serve different roles. ICE and CBP reports to Mark Wayne Mullen. I'm here. I help Stephen Miller. We develop strategies that send down to the programs for implementation. So we got different roles, but I think Mark Wayne Mullen's doing a good job.
How does the FBI investigate these ICE agents if they confront people? That is what the New York Times is saying. That's what their reporting is. They have something that 550 people had charges brought against them for assaulting federal officers. Of the more than 400 cases that were resolved, nearly half had unraveled.
You know what's going to help though? The body cameras. They didn't have body cameras. A lot of these confrontations happen. Again, I think body cameras are going to help. Look, I'm not going to comment on these investigations.
So that's the answer, not FBI investigating it, is what you're saying.
far as I know, there's been no change in policy. The FBI and DHS just responded to that story and didn't agree with it. Again, I'm not looped on that. I can just tell you from my experience, FBI has always been involved in shooting investigations. HSI, they're the criminal investigation part of ICE. They do the majority investigations in 111, which is assault impeding an officer.
How are training procedures changing? You talked about training the trainers. How are those training procedures changing? And
they're not changing. Training the trainers for the cameras. How do you operate the camera? What's the requirements? When do you turn it on? When do you turn it off? How quick do you need to store the data? How long is the data being stored? So there's a lot of work into this, and training the trainers. Once they get fully trained, they go to the field office with the equipment, and they implement and deploy it and tell people, here's how you use it, and here's how you go.
Uncle Claude, thank you so much for my super sticker. I'm so happy. Thank you so much.
are there
So what's the timeline then for every? What's the timeline then for every immigration agent to have a body camera?
As soon as possible, if that my way.
So you're satisfied with the training right now of ICE agents? Nothing needs to be improved.
There's always room for that's a loaded question. There's always room for improvement. Things change all the time. FBI updates their training, DEA updates their training, every police department updates their training. Because ICE used to look, you can never be overtrained. I wish there was more training.
I think American people want the answer of when every ICE agent will be wearing a body camera. I know you said as soon as possible, but is there a timeline floating around within?
That's a question for us. I know they got the deployment schedule, and I know they got the equipment. That's a question for us. I'm not in the weeds that deep.
Is this administration required to turn on their cameras at all times during a traffic stop?
Yeah. Yes.
Are the administration concerned
more about the quantity of ICE agents over the quality of the agents?
Say that again.
Is this administration more concerned about the number, the quantity of ICE administrations that have
No.
taken place over the quality?
I can't speak for everybody in the administration, but quality agents are very important. So it should be. You don't give somebody a badge and gun; they need to be the best they can be.
So are there going to be reevaluations on the hiring?
That's a question for us.
Is there any other procedure or protocol on the ground changing? Stops?
There's already, the director of ICE decided that there needs to be at least one body camera on the scene. And again, I'm a big supporter of the body cameras, and as more body camera gets out there, they all have them.
That's the only change.
But let's be clear, you can attack the men and women at ICE all you want. It comes down to one simple fact: these people fail to comply with law enforcement. Even some of the major chiefs in this country, who don't necessarily agree with this administration, says you always comply with law enforcement. But the hateful rhetoric that ICE isn't a real law enforcement agency. I see these signs that were resist. ICE are let's abolish them. They're fascists. When you keep that hateful rhetoric up for a year and a half, there's going to be that percentage of that part of that population that's going to be emboldened to take action because they're not real law enforcement agency. I should resist them. All they had to do is simply comply with law enforcement. If you don't like what law enforcement did to you, then go to the courts, sue. Call the ACLU, do whatever you want to do. But you should always comply with law enforcement. If they did, they'd be alive today. Now, I'm not going to comment on the investigation itself, but wait for it to play out. This is about complying with law enforcement, and a lot of the negative, hateful. And I said this a year ago: if a hateful rhetoric doesn't stop, there will be bloodshed. And unfortunately, I was right. Now, I'll tell you something else: it's not over yet. Unless they keep attacking and miscommunicating what ICE does every day, calling them Nazis and comparing ICE to the Nazi regime. Are you kidding me? And I'm not saying the whole country's convinced, but there's going to be that population that's just going to embolden to do something stupid. And I'm afraid that we're going to bury an ICE agent. I'm afraid I'm going to hand another folded flag to a spouse or a child of an ICE agent for simply doing his job. And for any member of Congress to keep attacking ICE and calling them fascists and Nazis, I said it 1,000 times. If they're a Nazi for enforcing the law, what's that make them? They wrote the law. We're not making this up. We're enforcing laws they wrote, and that they appropriate us money to enforce. Now, I'll say it once again: if ICE agents acted inappropriately or illegal, they'll be held accountable, just like they were held accountable in Minnesota. Everybody, guys. ICE agents are mom and dads too. They don't hang their heart on a hook every day to do this job. And it's just not attacking the ICE agents, attacking their spouses and children, and no one knows that better than me. I can't even go get a quart of milk at a grocery store without a security detail. Why? Because I'm enforcing laws in this country. It's pathetic and it's disgusting.
Thanks, Todd.
Oh, let's come home in. You guys, let me switch gears a little bit. Bear with me. Are you guys okay in the chat? We still friends? You guys are cutting up. You guys are cutting up. Let me switch gears. For those of you that are following this story, then you'll. Oh man, I just messed up. Hold on. Let me show. Thank you, Claude. Hang on, let me shut up while I get this clip because I'm just. Here you go.
Where officials are given a timeline, where they map things out for what they know.
I had the funeral today for no one else. Oh, yesterday.
Because obviously people are paying attention.
Yeah, you know, Ryan, it's always troublesome to all of us when these investigations just
Good morning,
take
Christina.
forever. I mean, 6 months to get a toxicology report back, to get an autopsy done, as if, you know, the longer we let it go, the more people forget other things happen. It gets swept under the rug. And so that's what's important, to have a timeline. And when you don't have that timeline, you start to say, oh, what Nolan Wells, what happened? I mean, I remember that case, but we got no answers. And so that's the trouble without having a timeline. And so that's why the people who are calling us, I mean, we have people presenting videos, and it's so helpful as we try to put this puzzle together. People are talking about their boats, and when they were out there, and when they were in earshot of Nolan and people on the boat, we need all of that information because we want to make sure what goes to the grand jury is accurate.
Right.
We know when it goes to the grand jury, we never will know what happened in that grand jury. That's why we're collecting affidavits. Did this get presented to the grand jury? It's never lost on me. It's never lost on me. You can get an indictment on a ham sandwich in the grand jury if you want to. Mm-hmm. The question is, are you trying to get to the truth? Or are you trying to help keep the truth hidden from us? And that's what we're fighting for. The last thing I would say is this, and it's important. You know, there are people who are presenting videos, photographs that may show Nolan was on the boat with the person, Katie. We got the fully bet that I respect so much what my mentor, Reverend Al, said up there. We're going to go wherever the truth leads us. We want the truth, no matter who it implicates or exonerates. We want justice, no matter who it acquits or convicts. So we know they're telling two different stories. You know, the boys telling one story, Katie telling one story. What is the truth?
One more question, just obviously, Mom and Dad, thank you for doing these conferences with us. But so many people from the community, both black and white, showed up today. Coaches said that they would love to have your son be their son. When you hear men and teammates reflect on your son's life in the way they have, can you explain to us what that sounds like in your hearts?
To me, that sounds like me and my wife did an excellent job at raising a fine young man.
Yes.
Nolan was loved by many, both young and old. He helped a lot of people. No matter if you were regular or handicapped, people still love Nolan. He would help special needs. He would help special needs kids all the time. Basketball, teach them how to play basketball. I mentioned in my speech about getting phone calls and emails. There was a father who asked Nolan to help his special needs son train for basketball, and Nolan did it willingly. and that made that kid's day. And he seen me out one day and he couldn't stop thanking me and praising me enough for the son that I raised and how much they meant to his son. So as far as I'm concerned, we did a great job.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
One more question. JD 4.5. We were asking, did you guys ever get the incident report back? We know it was an issue getting it.
No, we brought that up in our meeting, so hopefully we will address that. Won't be today, but we will address that. Okay.
Hi, my name is Ken. I'm from DFW Night Shift Crime in Dallas, Texas. Just want to offer my condolences to you. I wanted to ask you, what does honoring Nolan legacy look like for your family moving forward? Are there any foundations, scholarships, community initiatives, or causes you hope people will support in his memory?
Absolutely. This is actually something my cousin Keezy and I have briefly discussed. But of course, with everything that's going on, we want things to kind of cool down a little bit. My husband and I, honestly, we have not fully processed this. We have not fully grieved Nolan, but that is the plan, is to come up with some foundation, just to honor him, but also to United Cajun Navy, big help, boots on the ground almost immediately after I spoke with Josh Gill. So, you know, we have to remember those types of organizations in our communities and utilize them, but also give back to them. So that is our hope, that we'll be able to give as much as we've been given during this time.
Yes. Stephen Smith with the Associated Press. Is there any update to the independent autopsy that you guys requested?
Sure. And just on that last question, very good question. Christine and Elmore and Cliff Jones and Lisa Park at office, they talk frequently, and that's one of the things she stressed at the funeral service. She wanted to celebrate his life and celebrate and define what his legacy will be. So we look forward to working to define his legacy. Nobody else is going to define his legacy but the people who knew him best. Yeah. As it relates to the independent autopsy, we are looking to have findings sooner rather than later. Obviously, you want stuff from the first autopsy because they had the body closer to time. We got the body almost 6 days later, Dr. Roger Mitchell. So there are limitations as to what he could do. So, you know, you do the best you can, but there are unanswered questions. So he's getting his report together. I believe it will be coming very soon. Yeah.
Let me take one. I'm gonna take three more. 1, 2, and we'll come back to you.
Janelle Griffith with People Magazine. I also want to extend my condolences and to thank you for allowing the media to come. I know you didn't have to allow us to be here. I just had 2 small questions, both related to cell phones. One of the things that came out of your meeting with the local DA was that you agreed you would both analyze Nolan's phone. I wanted to know when that might take place. And the other was that at the end of the last press conference, you said you wanted everybody's cell phones looked at. So that, to me, that meant the other young men that were with Nolan that day. Did you communicate that to the DA, and what did she say? If so, have they analyzed their phones? Do they plan to?
I did communicate that to the district attorney. Whether they're going to do that, that's a question that you have to ask them. But we thought that it's only fair, if we're going to look at Nolan's phone, we should look at the other people who were with Nolan that day. Because, again, we just want equal justice. We think that if Nolan was on that boat, roles were reversed, they would look at his phone. And so that is going to be important. We have not established a time yet of when we're going to do the mutual inspection of the cell phone. We have to do some technical things. We're getting our experts together, working with phone companies and so forth. But we hope to do that sooner rather than later. This was a big first step for the family getting through the day. So now we can get laser focused on all those things to finish this investigation.
Will Folsom with WLOX. Ben, you had mentioned that
It had been a couple of days, I think you had said 6 days, since after the state's autopsy was done before you were able to get access to the body. I know whenever it first came out, it was being flown to DC and then autopsy planned for that Friday. Can you confirm when that autopsy was done?
They had weather issues, so I do think they got the body Friday night or Saturday morning, around that time.
Is that the same day that the autopsy was?
I can't confirm that. I know they received the body, and I think they immediately went to it. It would be in the report the date they did the autopsy. Yes.
Miss Selena Charles, the Purpose of the People. You guys are supposed to be having a rally on the 26th. Is that still going to occur?
Well, I think that was the community, people who are activists who we're very grateful, standing up, demanding a fair and impartial investigation. And we want to say thank you to all the community leaders and activists standing up saying, no, we want a timeline. We want transparency. We want them to check cell phones. We want everything that you would have done had it been your child. So that's what they're going to be talking about on the 26th.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sheldon, thank you for the gifts, my friend. Thank you so much, Sheldon Massenberg. Nix Mobile, thank you for the super sticker. I really appreciate you. Thank you guys so much that support my stream. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. That's sad. That's sad. Let me finish on a different note, what we normally talk about over here. Prayers for the family. Yeah, just pray for healing, you know. Only so little.
And right now, fighting escalating by the minute in the Middle East. We're getting new word of alleged missile and drone attacks by Iran on a neighboring Gulf nation after the United States unleashed a 9th straight night of targeted attacks hitting command centers and weapon sites in Iran. So welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Farino.
Morning to you. A brand new week begins right now. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning at home. So the Kuwaiti army is saying that its air defenses are encountering missile and drone attacks after Iranian aggression. Also at this hour, neighboring Bahrain, reports of incoming there as well. Both countries house a sizable U.S. military presence. At the moment, it's 5 o'clock in the evening their time, and the escalation coming after the Pentagon confirms that the deaths of 2 American soldiers killed on a U.S. base in Jordan. Another listed as missing with a recovery of unidentified remains. A 4th service member reportedly killed over the weekend in northern Iraq.
And CENTCOM says it can.
We have been retaliating against that violation of that deal ever since. And what are we doing? We're doing what we couldn't get done diplomatically. What is the fuss all about with the Straits of Hormuz? This is a strategic asset that exceeds the nuclear deal in terms of their enterprise. Why? Because their enterprise is largely under a mountain of rubble. But this is a means for them to have influence in the region and control the distribution of oil, something they have always wanted to have. And look, they're wanting to fight for it.
Alexandria Hoff reporting live from the White House. Hi, Alex. Good morning.
Hi, Dana. Good morning to you. Yeah, this morning, the War Department confirming the identities of 2 U.S. service members killed in an attack on Friday as an Iranian missile had made it through defense systems in Jordan on Friday. Now, the members killed, they were 25-year-old First Lieutenant James Fian. He was from Hawaii. Also, Private Isabella Gonzalez of Texas. She was just 19 years old. As you mentioned, the remains of a 3rd service member, they still are unidentified at this hour. A circulating video released by the Associated Press appears to show the deadly attack in Jordan carried out by an Iranian missile. It made it through protected airspace. President Trump yesterday expressed grief for the losses.
Those great people, those great patriots were out there fighting that Iran cannot have a nuclear.
So the current U.S. air campaign is being consecutive days of strikes focused on weapons hubs and command centers. Secretary Rubio spoke yesterday to the American losses as well.
It's heartbreaking, and our hearts go out to these families. These are heroes that pay the ultimate price. We also lost a service member in Iraq unrelated to combat. They were decommissioning a munition, and an accident happened in that process, and they were harmed.
That separate death took place in northern Iraq, occurring, according to the Pentagon, during a controlled detonation of an Iranian drone. And President Trump is looking to further squeeze Iran financially by urging Republicans to add Iran to the Russian sanctions bill currently being worked through. He said it is what Lindsey Graham would have wanted and what he was planning to do, Dana.
All right, Alex, thank you.
So I want to bring in Rebecca Heinrich, Senior Fellow, Hudson Institute. Rebecca, good day to you. You've been with us since the very beginning of this conflict. Reports of more U.S. F-16 and F-35s flown into the region happened before all the activity that happened this past weekend, maybe parked at air bases in Israel. Listen to Mike McCall on Sunday with Shannon on Fox News Sunday about escalation.
We stopped to negotiate a ceasefire and a negotiated settlement. That did not work with this regime. So now we're going to move forward with Plan A again. The military is going to move in, take out their launch pads, take out their ability to send Shahed drones to hit tankers. We got to knock out these targets inside of Iran to open up the Straits of Hormuz. That has to be the fundamental objective, key objective right now.
As you examine this and think about that plan, how long would that take before we could effectively knock out what he is describing there?
It would probably be a matter of weeks. So the target, if you look at what the United States Central Command.
All right. Also, can you tell me a little bit about what the Gulf nations, our allies, might be thinking right now? We just reported that Kuwait is under fire right now.
Right. So I would be focusing all of our diplomatic energy and activity with our Gulf partners, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, the Saudis, because we need to make sure that everybody.
Scheme of things, when we were talking with General Keane about an hour ago, we want to know what's different about this conflict now than maybe a week ago. To the outside observer, it may seem like it's just a constant tit for tat back and forth. Do you see it that way? Or is there something happening there that's not as obvious?
Well, I think that the administration still is looking for the possibility of an opening for a deal. And I don't think that there is going to be one. I mean, anytime you hear the Iranian negotiators say that they do want a deal, my answer to them would be, then why is Vahidi, the head of the IRGC, still alive? Why is he not being prosecuted for disobeying orders of the political leaders that are negotiating? Why isn't he been arrested? Vahidi is an IRGC commander who is a terrorist. He helped with Soleimani. Remember, Soleimani was the terrorist that President Trump rightly took out whenever he was in Iraq. He led the IRGC. And so Vahidi is still controlling the IRGC in the Strait. So I think that diplomacy with the Iranians right now is dead. And I think we need to be focusing on this military activity, economic squeezing, secondary sanctions against any country. I'm looking at China. I'm looking at Russia providing any help at all to the Iranians. That is what I would be focusing on at this stage.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you about, and especially in light of the terrible news about the men and women who were killed over the weekend. There is suggestions that Russia and China might be helping Iran with very precise targeting. Do you know if that's true?
Well, anytime I see drone activity or missile activity that is very, very precise, I always begin to think, goodness, these Iranians are getting help from the Russians or from the Chinese.
Sheldon Massenberg, thank you again for the gift, my friend. Thank you.
What is making this war more drawn out than I think it would be otherwise is President Trump is so sensitive to that, and he does not want American casualties. And so he's trying to conduct this war as effectively as possible with as minimal American casualties as possible, which means we've ruled out large ground invasions or anything like that that would increase the risk to you.
We'll see what we get today, and we'll see what's happening in Kuwait and Bahrain as we move through this hour. Thanks.
Thank you.
Rebecca.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Trey Yanks joins us live now from Tel Aviv. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Another heavy night of U.S. strikes against Iran. This was the 10th consecutive night of strikes aimed at degrading Iran's ability to threaten vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. Central Command released a statement saying, since early May, CENTCOM forces have helped to facilitate the transit of approximately 900 commercial vessels and 450 million barrels of crude oil. They went on to say American forces remain postured and prepared to hold Iran accountable for unwarranted aggression towards civilian mariners seeking to freely and openly transit the strait. Early this morning, Iran attacked another tanker off the coast of Oman, forcing the crew to evacuate the vessel, according to maritime tracking groups. This does come after President Trump issued a new warning to the regime about killing American forces in the Middle East. The commander-in-chief said,
Cool, thank you.
quote, every time Iran kills an American soldier, they will pay for that killing many times over. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson was asked this week about the possibility of U.S. forces entering Iran. This was his response.
They will face the consequences. I believe there are people in those very areas, and they are not few in number, who are counting the moments until they can welcome them.
The comments come as the Wall Street Journal reports that Iran moved nuclear centrifuges into Pickaxe Mountain, an underground facility next to the Natanz nuclear site. The report, based on Israeli intelligence, is the latest to focus on this site. President Trump indicated last week to Fox News he is considering new strikes against the facility. We're also tracking developments with the Houthis in Yemen. This is one of Iran's largest proxies. And according to initial reports, the Houthis say they are implementing a naval blockade against Saudi Arabia, possibly expanding this broader Middle East conflict. Guys?
Trey Ying's live for us this morning. Trey, thank you. Let's bring in former NSC Chief of Staff under President Trump, Alex Gray. Alex, my concern is that we can continue to bomb their command centers, their launch sites, their air defenses. But if they continue to have an endless, cheap and replenishable supply of drones, we're just going in circles, Alex.
Well, Todd, I think there's a huge challenge there, obviously. But the key thing at the moment that we're facing is the reality that just as President Trump always says in U.S. politics that he's a counterpuncher, right? If the opponent goes and says something about him, he hits back. He's even more of a counter.
We remember those who lost their lives, their names. Private Isabella Gonzalez, 19 years old. First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, 25 years old. Those were the two American soldiers killed in the attack in Jordan over the weekend. May God pray and take care of their families during this horrific time. But retired General Keith Kellogg says the time for airstrikes alone is now over, Alex, and he wants troops on the ground to take certain strategic targets. Do you agree?
Look, I love General Kellogg, but I think that right now the American people are interested in trying to find a way to protect the men and women who are over there, to protect our assets in the region, but to bring this conflict to the type of conclusion that the president and the vice president were looking for when they signed the MOU that Iran has not honored. So I think the goal here is to use our air and our naval assets to bring this conflict to a conclusion that serves our interests and allows us to move on to other priorities. I think going with boots on the ground, with all due respect to the great General Kellogg, I think that's not where the American people want to go. And I don't know that that's in the interest of the United States right now.
The Financial Times is reporting the Trump administration is once again considering regime change via an internal uprising. Do you think it's time for that?
Look, the Iranian people, this is ultimately their fight. And the Iranian people for years have been under the thumb of this murderous regime. And the only way, ultimately, the final, the solution to this 47-year conflict is for the Iranian people to rise up and to reclaim their country. And to the extent that the United States can help facilitate that, that's the ultimate way that this is going to be resolved once and for all, is to give the Iranian people the freedom that they deserve. If there's a way for the U.S. to help make that a reality, that's certainly in our long-term interest to do so.
Quickly, before we let you go, one defense expert from Cato telling the New York Post that we don't have enough weapons for a prolonged war, which is unfathomable to me, considering, our defense spending and our military might. Pentagon pushing back on that. Alex, quickly, about 20 seconds. Where does the truth lie?
It's probably somewhere in the middle, Todd. Look, we have consistently under-resourced our munitions, the high-end weapons that we use in conflicts like this. We don't spend nearly enough of that huge budget on those munitions. We need more of them. We need them for deterrence reasons in the Indo-Pacific, and we need them in places like the Middle East as well. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Alex, great insight this morning. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming.
All right, you guys, you good? Hold on. So I will be back later. I try to catch you guys' comments. Sometimes the chat goes fast and I might miss something, but I am reading you guys' messages, even if I can't respond that fast. Pete Hegseth is set to testify in the morning, I believe 7 o'clock, at least Pacific Standard Time. So I will try to recap that for you if it's not too long. What do you guys say? Oh, you guys are talking amongst yourselves. Okay. So if you want to contact me, leave me a comment under my community post. I'll read all my comments. If you have a video idea, whatever, or you just want to communicate with me, leave me a comment. Other than that, you guys, however, Claude, I'm starting to stutter a lot. I have to go get my workout in before work. Oh, Kaiser, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you. Thank you guys for your support. Claude, Sheldon Massenberg, Nix Mobile. I appreciate you guys so much for supporting my stream and just you guys for being here. Hit the like when you can, and I'm praying for our country. Let's keep it great. All right. So have a great rest of your day, and I will be back later. You guys know I come on pretty early in the morning, so so make sure you hit the notification bell because I'm pretty random at night. I love you guys. Take care. Stay strong.